Hi, welcome to the second part of this week's episode. Where John, Dave, and myself are going to look forward to Leinster's match against Edinburgh and all the other Pro 12 fixtures. So we play Edinburgh. They beat us in last year's fixture. Wasn't actually played in Murrayfield. It was played in Burmuir's grounds, the opening match of last year's fixtures.
Yeah.
But they beat us. I think they beat us 16-9.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were shy quite a few with the World Cup.
Yeah, we were in severe trauma. Edinburgh are not. They're not the kind of team you want to play away from home, really, because they're not very creative at all. They find it difficult to put together enough phases with their backs to score a try. They're tough bastards up front. They're big pack, and you're gonna get injuries playing them. You're gonna get, you know what I mean. It's a tough battle. We should have the quality to take them, but it's no gimme. I think a lot of people are thinking, oh yes, just Edinburgh. We'll walk over there and we'll horse them out of it. We may not.
Alan Solomon's teams at home are always really, really hard to play. I mean, during when Ulster didn't qualify, and what? No, indeed, no, that's a valid point. When Ulster weren't up to all that much under him, they were still pretty hard to beat in Ravenhill.
Yeah, well, they always have been. Yeah.
Southern Kings, pretty hard to beat, as the Lions found out. They were a tough team. And Edinburgh the exact same way. I mean, his teams to a certain extent are kind of identikit.
They're all full of South Africans.
Well, quite frankly, they might be identical, but they're also Afrikaner. I think we're good. We should be good if we can hold them or compete up front. Then we win.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that's Edinburgh are a team that. They've signed Dougie Fife at out half, and he's a good signing for them. No,
that's not his name.
That's not his name. No.
Duncan Weir.
Sorry. They signed Duncan Weir at out half. I mean, he's a good player, despite his obvious lack of a neck.
The wee meatball, I think, is his nickname.
I mean, he can do more with their backline. I don't think so, because he's not that kind of a player. I don't know. If we can compete with them up front, as I say, then we should beat them, because they don't have a huge amount behind us.
They're at home. You never know.
One of the biggest factors that is a problem for, I think, anyone going there is the match is on Friday night. It's going to be soulless, empty. 2,500 people turned up last weekend to watch them play the Scarlets, and it must be just so difficult.
Yeah,
to get up for a game.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah,
running around, like, it must be like playing in just
the Elephant's Graveyard.
In the Elephant's Graveyard, like, whereas compared to say even last week in Glasgow, the sun was shining, there was a full house, the atmosphere was fantastic, and Glasgow were a very good side. You go over there to Edinburgh and it's just soulless.
I think that, well, obviously we know that they're trying to rectify that by moving to Myerside, which they hope will be their Scots tune. They'll start to get that kind of, because they had one thing they have actually is they've built up quite a bit of a, if you like, a fan activity. You see stuff on their nose, but they do have a good. A small, if well formed, fan base. They encourage that move.
Long suffering.
Long suffering. That was a fan led thing, to have that thing where they stand along the sideline. Now it looks very untidy, but at least it gets people close to the pitch and try. It's an attempt to create some kind of atmosphere,
Yeah.
So I think that the idea is they move to Myerside. They build on that the same way as Glasgow did. Move the big games to Murrayfield the same way as Leinster do, kind of thing. But on Saturday or this weekend we won't be playing them in.
Is your man?
We're playing them in Murrayfield. So
is your man Nassi Manu still out? He's still out for them, I think. So
yeah.
There's a little thing we won't have to deal with. I think we're going to get a lot of our international players back this week. The ones that aren't injured, like
I can see
Jamie Heaslip, Devon Toner. Yeah, well,
a lot of forwards.
If you
talk of McGrath, Toner, Cronin,
Cronin, Heaslip, there.
Possibly O'Brien, I read. But
no, I don't think that's.
I'd be dubious over O'Brien. It'd be great, but I
think
he's actually good and all as he is.
He's October.
He's
I think.
One guy we can actually, to a certain extent, carry the loss we can carry.
Well,
because
the position, like I know we talked about Levy and Van der Fleer, and they're just. How they seem to interact well as well, and Murphy. In fact, the three of them last week were great. They seem to be able to. They're like having two sevens You've got one on each side of the scrum, so they're kind of interchangeable. And they've both played 7, and they both come up reasonably through similar age grades and stuff. And I know you were saying a few weeks ago that Van der Fleer usually got the edge on him, but
You usually got the 7, you got the edge, you got the 7.
in fact, he didn't really. Of the only times he got it was when Levy was injured, and Levy was injured a lot
Yeah, well,
at the wrong time. Like Levy spent most of the last year injured, but I think in the mind of most of the players of that age, Levy was the man ahead. Levy was the one who was talked about the previous season before Josh Van der Fleer made his.
I mean, well,
So-
there's always a guy like that. The great thing about Levy is that he is delivering on. I mean, there's always guys who are talked about in school, and in Leinster we really do boil the arse out of some of these guys.
Yeah.
You know? But Levy is delivering. That's the great thing about it, which a lot of other guys haven't.
But-
I mean, he's done a lot more already in his career than say Brendan Mackin did.
Well, what Van der Fleer did last season was phenomenal.
I mean, he's an Irish international.
He is an Irish international, and he still looks so good. Like he's so committed. Attack, defence, power, pace. You know, any area you want to look at, he's got it. And Levy now seems to be coming into his stride, and if he can put together a run of games,
Well,
he's
think of how good they look with Murphy behind them.
Mhm.
Right? Think of how good they're going to look with,
With
the
Jamie
ultimate,
Heaslip out
the
there.
ultimate catalyst. The guy you add Jamie Heaslip to anything and he makes a back row better, kind of thing, by making the other players freeing them up.
the Rolls Royce of eights.
Yeah, he is going to make. I think him between those two
Could be exciting.
It's going to be excellent. It really is.
And you know the two of them can run the lines that Murphy was running off Joey Carberry. Sean O'Brien's going to have to be fit and firing. Like reputation alone will put him in most teams in the world. But those two lads are going to make it very tough
Oh yeah.
for him to get back. He'll have to be fully fit.
Have
You
to
know,
get his
just
best.
like a season ago or 2 seasons ago, we were going Keane Healy, Jack McGrath. Geez, Jack McGrath's great. It'd be great if he might approach the standard of Keane Healy someday. Now we're going, Jesus, Jack McGrath's great. I wonder will Keane Healy ever get his starting jersey back? You know, which he may or he may
and
not.
you see the effect of it, how good Keane Healy's been at the beginning of this
We-
season.
Exactly, yeah. But we could be saying that about Josh Van der Fleer or Dan Levy and Sean O'Brien in a year's time. You know,
I hope so.
who knows? I'm not saying we will, but you know, especially if he doesn't get a good run of games together, those two guys are, you know,
Because you see, we saw, and this is the thing with Sean. We didn't see enough of, like against Munster last year, for example, down Thomond Park. We saw he was on a different level than
Yeah,
than
yeah.
pretty much everyone else. So if he can come back and bring that, and have that fired by the competition he's getting from the two boys, I mean that's going to be huge for Leinster, because like rugby, as we always say, is a squad game. You know,
Yeah.
you don't want 3 back rows, right? You want 5. You know, because you're going to use them in the match. You're going to use them to take the pace up, to take the pace down. You know, you can change. If you can change your back row, you can change it. Because I always think that the heartbeat of a match is the back rows. They kind of set the pace. If they're slow on the clear out, the game is slow. If they're quick on the clear out, the game is quick. You know, if they're supporting the players, they're the heartbeat of a match.
something you referred to earlier was the way Hines was sometimes used to go back into the back row. Now the guy's 6'7" or so, and you know, probably not ideal in the back row, but it was a very effective tactic at certain points of the game where you could have a big mauling side, like where you'd have him and 2 other second rows to do all the grunt work at the expense of perhaps a bit of speed on the ground, etc. And then you could bring on the like of Jennings, move him into the second row. You know, you bring Jennings on for one of the other second rows, put him in.
I remember we played again. Funny enough, Munster and Thomond Park, and they started Hines at 6, and they had Cullen and Toner in the second row. And the idea was that they were absolutely going to target Munster set piece, because you had all this huge beef both in the scrum and in the line out.
Yeah.
How did it work out?
My question.
We won pretty handily.
My question is, who's that person in the current Leinster squad? Don't really have a. I mean,
we don't have a necessity.
Ruddock can go
Yeah,
forward
that's what I
into the
was gonna
second
say.
row,
Well,
but is it ideal?
No, I wouldn't talk.
Can
About,
any
I,
other-
wouldn't, I wouldn't talk about using them in the second row. But what I'm talking about using it is you could start. Say we wanted to start. We wanted to play a game really, really quick, right? So you start off with Heaslip. You start off with the 2 boys, the young lads, right? And you just keep the pace high. Then after an hour, when the opposition are beginning to get a bit knackered, they make their change and they think, oh, we're going to get a bit of a break. Then you bring on Ruddock and Sean O'Brien. and you absolutely
I just-
mill them.
I think it just changes the
Means your
emphasis.
second rows
Yeah.
have to play
But it just
80 though.
It just
Well, you can
changes.
change it. You can bring other second rows on. I mean, are you going to change your back line? Maybe, maybe not.
I suppose.
I think it changes your emphasis and your particular tactics. Like
Mm.
like in our heyday, we used to have I wouldn't say necessarily with Hines in the back row, but we would have had. You would have brought
McLaughlin,
on. You would have brought
O'Brien.
on Jennings.
Mhm.
You would have brought on
Yeah.
pace and upped it, but changed the emphasis on how we were attacking from a bulkier pack to a speedier pack.
Well,
If you-
McLaughlin and
if-
Jennings were the swap.
And
Like
if you did that nowadays,
Sean O'Brien moved
you
across.
might bring Sean O'Brien in,
Mhm.
as you say, to batter them, or bring on
Yeah.
Levy for a bit of pace.
Yeah, you have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one thing that we do have that we mightn't have had in those. Okay, they don't have the experience of a Leo Cullen or a Nathan Hines or even a Brad Thorne, but with the likes of Carney and Ross Maloney, they don't have the years either.
Mm.
I mean, they've got those young engines.
Well, if you could think of getting, you could play that kind of a game if you could think of getting 80 out of Maloney and Mick Carney. You know, if you get them fit enough to get 80 out of them, and you'd have Ruddock there in case of,
Mhm.
you know, break glass in case of emergency, put him in the second row. That could be a viable tactic, you know, that you could actually have Ruddock, O'Brien, Levy, and Van der Fleer all
You're not using Hayden, no?
Hayden Triggs
For what?
for Europe. He's a good solid squad player,
he's
you know.
a good squad. Exactly, a good squad. He's a good solid pro, but I mean, and teams need them. But I mean, he's not, and I don't think he'd be. Considering himself to be a front rank international class player either.
Mm.
I mean, he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong, good squad player.
Yeah, well, as things currently sit, he's ahead of Nagel.
Yeah, and Nagel's injured.
And Nagel's injured. If Nagel wasn't injured. So, you know, he's...
He started in Bath, didn't
Hmm?
he? He started in the European game in Bath last year.
Triggs?
Mm.
Did he?
I think so, yeah.
I didn't realise that. There you go.
Yep.
It was an injury cover or something, was
I
it?
don't know, but he just came over. It was around just shortly after he came over.
Didn't know that.
He's a good player. I mean, you don't get to play as much professional rugby as he's played in New Zealand without being good at it,
And Japan.
and Japan as
And
well.
Bath.
and Bath, without being good at it, you know.
Yeah. No, he is. He's jeez, we gotta say it every week. Kiwis on their basics and the way he can pass and do all that stuff.
He's
But,
a really good footballer, yeah.
yeah, but you know, he's... Perhaps you would have other options ahead of him if you were facing
Yeah.
somebody in Europe, you know. Anyway.
Well, talking about options, we got some viewer questions in. If I can open my phone, which maybe we'll take. Jason, is this
Yeah,
an
sure.
opportune moment?
Absolutely.
In Jason has that thing. Okay, Irish Underage Rugby asks, how thoughts on how Luke McGrath has played?
Mm-hmm.
How do we think Luke McGrath? We were discussing kind of passing earlier. Weren't we?
Yeah, well, when I was at the match there on Saturday, I thought that neither him nor the other lad
JMO.
had a particularly good game. Like, it was functional.
Mhm.
He threw one particular pass. I just
Yeah,
that-
man,
that
knocked
he,
on, yeah, at his toes.
Carberry did knock on,
Yeah.
but like, you know, he probably threw 40 or 50 or 100 passes. So, you know, one bad one. But I just thought the service was, a lot of the time, Carberry was reaching for it. It was, again, shoulder height or above his head, you know. It
Mhm.
wasn't this beautiful service that you're going to run onto.
Wasn't silver service.
It wasn't. And I'm, you know, like, that makes, like, those sharp passes. It's in a game where every split second counts. That you've got, if you have to adjust yourself or raise your hands above your head, you're not fully sprinting onto that ball.
Do you know why that is? Well, one of the reasons is that Dave was always saying about us being kind of spoiled the way we played our game in Ireland with Stringer, because that's what he was. He was a pass with hands and a head. And, you know,
That's a good way. I've never
Where-
seen that described as that, but yeah.
where, you know, other scrum halves are a break-in threat, or like Murray is an everything threat. He's a box kicking threat. He's a sniping threat. He's a kick the head off you threat. And he has a pass. If you see your 10 as being the main general, which we do in Ireland, whereas in France, the 9s and 10s are a lot more interchangeable. I'm just bringing France as an example. So your 9 can also control the game. Look at Ruben Pienaar. There's a guy who, now the reason I suppose it may be a better idea to have your 10 controlling the game a lot of the time is because they can see more of the game. They haven't got their head in a scrum. They haven't, So yeah, but they just don't have to control the game all of the time. And I think something that he brings is he has great control of the game.
Who
He is
does?
great. McGrath.
Really?
He has great control of the forward pack. He has. I don't mean he's great control of that. He's a great pass. I mean he knows when to snipe. He knows when
Can
to.
I just say, John, right? Redden was in the twilight of his career, and
Mhm.
Boss had kind of probably outstayed his career by a season. And
And he didn't
like,
oust
right,
either of them.
Now, okay, Redden was the third Irish choice, but there's only
Mhm.
four Irish. There's only four professional teams, and one of them has a Springbok playing for them. So there's only three other, teams that have Irish qualified starters.
Mhm.
So it's not that difficult to be the third best choice, Irish scrum half, right? But he didn't oust either of them,
Mhm.
or it took him, to the latter end of last season. Come on, we all want him to do well. But
Of
he's
course.
24. He's probably played, I'm guessing now, 50 or 60 times
yeah.
for.
Has he played that
Yeah,
much?
he has. Yeah,
Has
he?
it's that many. Yeah,
And I can remember going.
he's a
to-
sizable number. Like,
I can remember going to a match where Paddy Jackson played for Ireland. It might have been against France about 3 years ago. Murray wouldn't have had a huge amount of experience either. He would have played in the World Cup the previous year,
Mhm.
but he might have only had a handful of Irish caps. I mean, not even 20, 10 caps. My point being, though,
He protected.
he protected Paddy Jackson unbelievably. And
I don't think
he
that's
took
the kind of scrum half
but look,
McGrath is.
McGrath's the captain of the team.
Well,
He's
that was my next sentence.
24, 25, played 50 times for Leinster. And you have a kid that looks very good, but he's still a kid. He's 20. He's played 3 games for Leinster.
Mhm.
I thought, and you said that he I just didn't see him bossing the game.
No, I don't think I wouldn't say he's the kind of scrum half that protects the out half. I just what I mean by his decision making is that when the out half is making the decisions, his decisions are like kicking for a touch, getting the back line moving, taking a break on himself. Whereas if you move that forward one position, like if you're Peter Stringer, like you can will that ball from there to there in a fraction
I
of
know,
a second.
but if you go
Whereas
back to- sorry.
if you're somebody who has all 3 of those things, now in fairness to Stringer, he was great at bossing his pack around as well. It was one of his big party tricks also. But if you have the ability to make all of the 3 things, and in fairness, his box kicking isn't great either, is it?
who's?
Luke McGrath's.
I thought you were talking about Peter Stringer's because I was
No.
going to say those are the 2 weaknesses in Stringer's game: are his box kicking and his break.
Well, I think Luke McGrath is a great break. I think that's one of the big things about him. If he could sharpen the service, I know we've been saying this for a while, and he hasn't done it. So it may. He's got a bit of competition in there now. Knighton played well, as you said last week. Whether that competition makes him or breaks him, we'll see. It's a good thing for Leinster that it's
Just
there.
one thing about his box kicking. I don't like the way that Leinster kicked the ball, or haven't liked the way that Leinster's kicking pattern has evolved over the last, we say, year, 18 months. Right? And Luke McGrath has kicked the ball exactly the same way as every other Leinster player has kicked the ball. Probably badly, but I think to orders. So I wouldn't be too sure that his kicking is that bad. I think that Leinster kicked the ball in a certain way. There were contestables, but they didn't get much distance, and they weren't really that contestable either. But that was the pattern we kicked it, because you had much more experienced players than him kicking the ball equally badly in exactly the same way.
Perhaps. I just see him as a different kind of scrum half. Whether he makes the grade or whether he gets passed out swiftly by Gibson Park is another matter. Gibson Park is decent, and when he gets up to speed with Leinster style of play, he could pass him out. We'll see who gets the jersey against
he looked very good
Cast.
in the match against Bath, and I thought he was quite anonymous in the match the weekend.
Yeah, well, he's coming on. He's making a habit of coming on at the end of games, like he was doing it for the Hurricanes all season.
Hurricanes were generally in a slightly more dominant position
Yeah,
than we were
but
at the weekend.
yeah, but he's also behind TJ Paranara, who's a little bit handy.
Yeah. But I thought just going back to McGrath, I thought he was captain of the team, and I thought couple of his decision making, particularly, and I mentioned it earlier.
Going to the corner.
I just thought you have
going
to
for his
win the
points.
game
Yeah.
first. You don't go for the 4 try. You go and you win the game. And if we had
Could have been orders too.
we could have been, but we were 10 points clear.
Mm-hmm.
You get your lead. If you put another 3 and 3 points on that, there's no way they would have come back.
Mm.
Going for all in. It didn't
High
work.
risk
Maybe he
strategy.
wasn't-
And
Maybe he wasn't
psychologically, well, Carberry was he kicked one from the sideline, and the second one for Kirshner's, he converted Rob Carney's, and
Mhm.
for the Kirshner's try, which put in the corner, it was on his bad side, and it just dropped short. It had the direction, but it just didn't have.
Yeah,
the distance.
maybe he wasn't. I mean, he has played with Carberry a lot more than we would have seen Carberry kind of thing. So maybe that's was feeding into his decision. I don't know.
It's definitely shit or get off the pot year
Yeah.
for Luke McGrath. So we'll see.
I remain unconvinced by him.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm hugely convinced by him, but I like. Well, obviously we all like to see our own
Of course.
lad, do well. I just wouldn't like to write him off, and I think his pass gets criticised an awful amount more than it probably deserves to. His pass isn't wonderful, but it's distracting from other good aspects of his game. Like he's a really dedicated lad, and he's always.
Things like that have a
in the
tendency
thick of it.
to become
That's why he's captain.
quite noisy in a player's ear. I remember when, for example, Dennis Hurley down in Munster went through a period where he was just missing everything in the air, and it became this thing that Dennis Hurley couldn't catch a ball. Now Dennis Hurley, I mean, okay, he's not Gervin Dempsey, but he was decent enough under a high ball. He was a Gaelic footballer and knew how to do it. He just had the yips. And sometimes the noise can build up and become a feedback kind of thing. Bit of a, like you were talking about your new effects pedal. It can become a bit of a feedback loop, and it can loop in on a player if the criticism is constant. So maybe that can happen. It gets into a player's head that, I have to be ultra careful with this pass, and then they overdo it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced either way on the guy. I'm not.
No, I'm not saying.
And
I would agree. I'd
I'd love
agree
to
with
see
both of
him.
you kind of thing.
I'd love to see him come good.
I'd agree with both your points, but I'm just saying that sometimes these things can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It'll be interesting because I don't from watching the game. I don't think Jamison Gibson Park had the most brilliant day with his wrists either. So
No, he threw a couple of shockers, but let's see when
Stringer's
Cast.
available still, right?
Let's see when we visit Montpellier at the end of August or at the end of October. Let's see who's in possession.
Bismarck Duplessis less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be
Montpellier,
nice.
which
Good
is
stuff.
interesting. And just a further, there's a second part to that question. Will we ever, when, if ever, will we see Tom Daly or Adam Byrne? You can see them most days. They're generally at the matches. Nice guys, and you can go for that. No,
When we see them not in the
I was
stands.
surprised that we haven't seen. I thought Tom Daly did really well in the pre-seasons. But maybe they decided to go with the extra experience of Reid with so many other
Yeah.
players absent,
Well,
Yeah.
and a young guy inside him.
They brought O'Loughlin on at fullback for
Yeah.
every game, I think. Well,
But they brought him on for the fullback,
all
not
two.
at
Sorry,
fullback.
yes, but
So, we saw Adam Byrne as well in pre-season, and he looked fairly decent. In
Yeah,
fairness, you have to give these guys a run sometime.
But maybe there's a sense that
When-
okay, if we give Guy A run now, and then when the internationals come back, he'll have built up a certain store of experience. Then when the internationals bugger off again, we'll have Guy A as an experienced player. Then we can bring in Guy B, and we can blend them in. Maybe that's the thought. Maybe they don't want to throw too many young guys because there's also, it's an inexperienced team. There's new players there as well. Henshaw's a new player, new to Leinster.
If we ever see him,
There's guys like Nagel, Gibson Park, a couple of guys who are new to Leinster. So maybe the idea is that maybe we won't unleash them all at once. We're already seeing obviously Carberry to great success. O'Loughlin I think has done well in his cameos.
I thought
actually,
Ringrose,
does he mention? Oh, he does mention it's Adam Byrne. I just
Yeah.
he could have meant Ross Byrne because we're not
Yeah,
seeing much
yeah,
of him
no,
either.
Tyburn.
I think that
He's playing for the Scarlets now, isn't he?
Yeah. He is. Yeah, he was on the bench for them the other day. I think that Ross Byrne has. I thought he was a very good player. I still think he's a very very good player. But if a guy goes like Harvey's gone out and he sees that chance with two hands, so
You got to keep backing Carberry as soon as he's playing so
Oh
well.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Adam Byrne and Tom Daly, interesting. Like, I think you're right about the experience of Reid, and actually, Reid didn't have such a shocking game as a defence. Like
No.
the defence in the first half included him.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, no. He got turned over a few times.
he
but
did,
He wasn't
but
the
he-
only one that did either.
no, and he looked improved in defence.
A player getting turned over,
And he's
particularly
lovely in
isn't
attack.
necessarily always
True
his
enough.
fault,
Yeah,
you know.
that's very true.
Reed's another one actually. There's a bit of a. I mean, nobody would ever claim that Reed was the greatest defender ever, but he's one of those guys where every tackle that he misses gets magnified out of all proportion.
Just like your man's pass.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's the same thing. You're waiting for it. It's confirmation bias. You know,
It's,
you're
that was
waiting.
the phrase. That was the
Yeah.
first brilliant. Yes.
Tom Daly, however, he's very I can hardly remember him playing for Leinster. I know he played the B&I team, but like he seems to have got little, if any, game time in the past few years.
Yeah, he was away a lot of last year on that
Sevens, yeah.
ridiculous Farrago.
Your favourite. But
Adam Byrne as well, isn't he?
Not as much as Tom Daly. Tom Daly captained the Irish
He's the
Sevens
captain,
team,
yeah.
which shows that he's regarded at least to a certain level in some quarters. You know,
But maybe he sees it as an opportunity.
to play top level rugby. Yeah.
Like a big guy like him playing in the centre might be the right foil for someone like Ringrose. I always thought. I don't know. You know, maybe we'll see it later in the season.
He's a very orthodox, and I mean that in a good way, inside centre, in that he's a very good, strong kicker of the ball as well. He can play that second 5'8" role.
And Adam Byrne, like, Jesus, how many times have we been saying pace and power out wide? What we don't have in the team. Like, we've got some really good players, but like, you know, Fergus McFadden is a guy that you'd love to see in any dressing room. He seems to be such a committed guy, so you know, but he doesn't have the pace he once had. He has the power, in fairness to him. A lot of they're just guys who are on the wrong side of 30 now, and we need a young guy like that who can burn people on the outside and burn people. Didn't even do that on purpose, but
Pity you did it by accident.
but you know, we need guys like that. So why he's not getting out?
That's
I don't
Leinster
know.
are very one
Conservative. Oh, they're one-paced, yeah.
and I think part we discussed it before. I think partially that's the reason why there's so much attention from Leinster's perspective. Why so much attention has been placed on putting Ringrose into the back to try and put a combination of pace and power in there. And he has the advantage that he's more experienced at least than Byrne. But yeah, no, I think that the reason for both Daly and Byrne there's an element of, you know, you don't want to put too much inexperience on the pitch at the same time. You do have to blend these guys, because otherwise you get a situation where we used to send guys over to Dragons and let them sink or swim, and guys were never seen or heard of again.
And there was an awful lot of sinkers, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe later in the season we'll blend him into a better balanced team.
But
You've also got a Lachlan as well, fine for 12 or 13.
It ties into another question, like what can Leinster do that we had on Twitter, and what can Leinster do to get more speed and threat into the back three? And it's all kind of the same thing. I mean, the problem for us is that we're not the guys who are really quick tend to play Gaelic football. The real speedsters have tended to play Gaelic football in the past, and it's very hard to coach speed. You know, you can turn guys into, you can get more out of guys, but you can't actually make them faster. You can get them to deliver their acceleration and their pace better through good coaching and technique. You can't actually make somebody faster.
Really can a bit.
Yeah, but it's only
Margot
marginal gains.
can do shit like that. Alan Wells' missus.
Yeah. He was on the juice, was he?
God
Allegedly.
knows. God knows.
He was in a Bell and Sebastian video. I'll have nothing said against Alan Wells. Thank you very much.
He was a big lad, all right, but you know, his missus has worked with a lot of rugby teams as well. Cipriani, I was about to say, yeah, and Wasps, who put an extra yard of pace into himself allegedly due to her input. So
that might have been turning up to training sober. Might have been an issue, you know, and getting rid of the crotch itch. But no, I mean, how can we get more speed threat into the back three? Quite simply, it's get to small corner forwards before the GAA does.
Big checkbook with Murad Boujalel written on it. Just rob it for a
There
week.
are fast guys in Irish sport. They're just not playing, and just not all of them are playing rugby. You know, you see guys like, say, Kevin McMenamin. Kevin McMenamin would make a great winger. So you know, the Dublin half forward, he'd make a fantastic winger, but he's not playing rugby.
We could poach some of the Ulster lads.
Well, actually, I was just going to do a preview of the Munster match, right? And one thing that I just have written down here was that
Somebody we successfully
Sweetman was targeted from. He played underage rugby and was playing. He was a senior Cork hurler,
Mm-hmm.
and he looked a fine player at the weekend. You know, great turn of pace and a
Yeah,
very
he has a
big,
good
strong, powerful man. You'd wonder, and I think we mentioned it on the show last year. Should the IRFU be looking at that and targeting, and going out and saying, "There's a 6'7" fella who's playing centre field for Dublin or Mayo or whoever. Why don't, has he got a rugby background? Go after him."
I mean, if you just time back into the speed thing, like the two fastest Irish guys I've seen playing for Munster the last 10 years, both came from hurling. In Tomás O'Leary, before he got injured that time, and now Sweetman.
Yeah, but I have to look outside the box, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just again, another, Connacht have just announced the re-signing.
Adia Logan.
Exactly. And he, in the press release today, he said he's the fastest man in the squad.
He's got pace. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got serious pace.
He's come an unusual route, coming over with his folks from Nigeria when he was a young fella. Not really, I think he played GAA and played rugby in school, and didn't get a contract or didn't play provincial rugby as a schoolboy.
But he was in Leinster development squads.
Yeah, but
by his own admission, he was more interested in Gaelic football and soccer, and he'd kind of fallen out of rugby. And then by the time he got the right coach came across him and got him back into the sport.
Yeah,
obviously he moved on.
But Connacht are kind of almost doing a Moneyball situation.
Yeah, well, that's it. They're taking the risk.
Yeah, and
for the reward.
But I'm sure his salary is way down. Maybe not so much
Not
now,
now.
but when they signed him initially, then it would be to go and get say Gary Ringrose, sort of a guy that had been a star at schoolboy level and was coming out and probably could have signed for any of the provinces if he wanted to.
I'd like to see Sweetenham poached by Leinster, just so as we could say that we had a Munster man in our backline for a change, rather than the other way around. And then we could have Munster fans all slagging us. Sure, all your backlines, you're all fucking Munster lads. What are you on about?
Well, here's another one that's down in Munster from Leinster. Tom Sexton. Do you remember him, the hooker?
Yeah,
He's
back.
down on a trial with
Is
them.
he?
Yeah.
Is he?
And apparently Munster are about to sign a South African project player.
That's right. Yeah, heard that.
Former baby back, Andries Griesel.
Well, he's actually in the province
Yeah, he's
for a
playing for
year.
Munster, but he works in a coffee shop, so can't be any good.
Don't know why you threw that in, but anyway.
Because a lot of the talk about our former Mario Caputo, he couldn't be any good because he worked in a coffee shop, if you recall.
Okay. I didn't cop that link there, Dave. Sorry.
But
Does he make good coffee though?
I have no idea.
Is he barista?
I don't know. I've no.
Does
Yes,
he
he's a barista.
make a nice cappuccino? Is he?
But I don't know. But he's a baby buck. He was in the squad on the bench for the World Cup winning team. If you remember, we beat them in their first matches, but they went on to win the tournament. He was in that team. So he's obviously got a bit of quality.
That was the year that what's his name was up for player of the tournament. JJ.
Yeah.
So
If you were
interesting.
I was going to say, if you were looking to poach somebody, you could go for JJ Hanrahan.
Yeah, but it's not a 10 we need, is
No,
it?
not at the moment. No.
Although he can play 12 as well.
Play 12 as well, but
We need wingers, we need a big fucking Fijian tank out there that has the turning circle of the QE2 but can run through a brick wall. That's what we want.
I really don't care where they come from as long as they can play a bit of rugby. But yeah, no, it is. I mean, Leinster are a bit one pace in the back three. I mean, it's a relatively fast pace, but it's still one pace, and there are teams that are a lot quicker out there.
And look, didn't Issa score most of our tries last season? He's
he's
our
our top try scorer,
Like he's on the pension nearly now. He's well into advanced years in rugby terms.
I look at last week. I was watching.
Even if he was half the player he'd be still incredible.
I was watching New Zealand against Argentina last week.
And
New Zealand have, and Argentina followed them, but New Zealand have yet again, they've changed the game completely. They've reinvented the game. It's now a game for the smaller man.
It kind of was that in the World Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
They'd moved away from
their last World Cup winning team was on
seem
the cusp, and this is maybe the smallest New Zealand team I've seen in 20 years.
And for every wave that it goes in, we're the opposite direction of it. We bulked up when everyone's getting smaller, and we're smaller when they're bigger.
New Zealand are just ridiculous. They've lost 6 or 7, 100 cap players, or kind of not quite 100 cap players, but guys who are at the top, and 2 in particular who I won't even need to mention. And what have they done? They replaced. Look at bloody Bowden Barrett.
Oh, he's magnificent.
He's just
He's magnificent.
stupid, like,
Yeah.
you know. Away goes Dan Carter to play with Rog, and next thing this guy just steps into the breach, and Sam Kane,
Easy, what, 12 stones soaking wet?
Sam Kane and Artie Sevilla,
Mm.
you know, are making a Richie combo together between them. It's
But
just
is Barrett 12 stones soaking wet?
he's not a big lad, all right.
And then-
His little brother who played in the under-20s is bigger than him, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. And then what's his
Considerably.
name? Isn't a huge lad either, although he's a player I think is wonderful. I love watching. Is Ben Smith.
Mm.
Not a massive man either.
He's been around a long
And
time
then
now. at
Conrad
this stage.
Smith was never a big guy. He was just
That's another one they
his,
lost.
his brain was huge.
Like Man Anu, Conrad Smith.
Yeah.
There's your centre partnership gone. What have they done?
Replaced.
Replaced it. Fekatoa. Like they're just the guys coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And they look, if anything, they're better than when they won the World Cup.
Sonny Boy, another one, you know.
Yeah,
Sonny Bill.
Sonny Bill is. I saw him on crutches, or he was doing something. He was
He
being
caught
in
himself during the Olympics.
the Olympics. Yeah, he was being interviewed on TV just before the game. I didn't hear the interview, but I saw his face. So you know, how do they do it? How do they come back stronger after losing that amount of players?
They're very good at rugby.
Why didn't I think of that? It's obvious, really,
Yeah,
when
there's
you,
the
when
answer.
you
They
think
poach
about
all
it.
those islands, don't they?
Yeah. No charge, Philip. We could poach like the Aran Islands and like Skelligs and stuff, and they were in Star Wars.
Yeah. The force might be with us.
Boys, as ever, thanks very much, and thanks very much for watching. Cheers.